Welcome to Creative Generations podcast. Today, in another episode of our Art of Becoming series, we talk to Andy and Dionne Noble, the co-artistic directors of NobleMotion Dance in Houston, Texas, and professors of dance at Sam Houston State University. If you enjoy this episode, please follow us on Instagram and our YouTube channel, or visit us at creativegenerations-dance.com.
What is Creative Generations? What makes it so unique, so needed? And what do we do? An organization created by dancers, we are a team of professional dancers and top wellness experts in dance nutrition and mind-body health who are fully dedicated to helping you thrive. Join Creative Generations and immediately have your own team of mentors and experts supporting you.
And I feel like there's a void in the dance world that no one wants to talk about, and this program is that, if that makes sense. Even if you're perfectly fine, there's still like podcasts you can listen to that you can experience breath work. Like there's always something to work on, even if you are in a good spot.
Sign up to speak to a dance mentor today and experience how these simple and powerful concepts will help you fulfill your dance potential. Together, we're rewriting the old myth of the suffering artist and writing your story. Start with us and immediately feel the difference in building the future you want.
All right, so Andy and Dionne Noble, welcome to the Creative Generations podcast. You are the founders of NobleMotion Dance in Houston, Texas, and you're also both professors of dance at Sam Houston State University. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having us, Rhodes.
We're excited.
Yeah, we're doing this series of episodes where we talk to artistic directors, not only about their role as directors and their relationships with dancers and organizations, but we're also trying to demystify the audition process, the hiring process, and kind of get some insight into that side of the dance world. Before we get into that, I just want to start where you both started and kind of get an idea of what initially inspired you to pursue a career in dance, and then how that led to having your own company and becoming artistic directors.
Yeah. Me? Well, I'm kind of the classic example of the student who started dance classes at 6 years of age and been doing it ever since. So I think that dance is very much just ingrained in sort of like who I am. And I did not know that I would go on to do this as as a professional dancer. Always thought that I would have to choose a different career, but somehow every choice kept coming back to every time I had to make a choice, I kind of chose dance over and over. So majored in dance at University of South Florida. Was sort of a double ballet and modern major kind of situation. I was able to dance with some small companies, went on, we've moved, I think we'll talk a little bit about the fact that we've sort of like lived in many different parts of the country. So dance has sort of allowed me to travel a lot and to engage in different dance communities, sort of, from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. Eventually got my graduate degree at University of Utah. They have a ballet program and a modern program. So I primarily did the modern program, the contemporary program. So at that point chose to go more into the contemporary route versus the ballet route. And and eventually taught at many universities and now at Sam Houston State University. I'll go ahead and say this. One of the reasons that we did choose Sam Houston State whenever we were finally figuring out where we might want to sort of invest in our careers as professors. We had a couple of options where we could both be at a university, and which was really important to us. We both wanted to be teachers and to pursue that part of our career, and we both wanted to start a dance company. So I think the reason for Sam Houston State is its proximity to Houston, in the fourth largest city in the country, very international city, very big, supporters of the arts. And so I think that us being at Sam primarily had to do with the fact that we could balance that with having a professional dance company as well.
Yeah.
I was like super short.
It was great.
My answer is really different.
Mhm.
I didn't take my first dance class till I was 19. However, I had a relationship with dance pretty early. And the first time I realized the power of dance was when I was 8 years old. And my parents were going through a divorce, and you know when you're a kid, your family's going through stuff, you don't want to add on to it. So I kind of stayed quiet a lot through that, and I think it's normal for kids sometimes to feel like they're part of the reason that a family is splitting up. They take that responsibility on. So I didn't want to do anything extra to add to that tension. So I was largely silent, holding in all of the feelings. And I had this wonderful music teacher, Miss O'Leary, who before school every day opened up her music room and let us come in and listen to music and dance. And at that time, I won't say the exact date, breakdancing was really just starting to come out and spread across the country. And I went in there, and there were a couple kids that were breakdancing, and I'd never seen anything like it. And they encouraged me to jump in, and I jumped into the circle, and I found a way to express myself that I didn't know existed. And all of a sudden, I felt this incredible release of emotions. But I also had this really wonderful feedback from the people who were like, wow, you're a really great mover. And so I was encouraged to keep coming back. And so it was at that moment that I realized the power of dance to really express my feelings without creating more, just the abstractness of it, without necessarily having to worry about doing saying the wrong thing in a challenging moment. And from there, it was part of my young teenage years, and I joined a hip hop crew, and we were all self-taught. We were in the streets, on cardboard, in garages, wherever we could do it, and spinning on carpets, just getting rug burns, trying to learn all the new moves, going to competitions, and we did pretty well. And then I thought, well, what am I going to major in? I got to college, and I tried a few things out, and ultimately was like, I'm going to take a dance class, and maybe I'll meet a girl, and who knows? And sure enough, eventually met her in undergrad, and I was hooked immediately. I should also say my parents are both playwrights, or have that background. I grew up in the theater a lot, and once I got into a choreography class, I realized I could take that abstract nature of dance and start to tell stories and create worlds with it, much like my parents did. But instead of using language, I could use the body, and something clicked. And I got, you could just see it lit a fire underneath me. And all of my professors were like, "You're going to be a choreographer. That's what you're going to do." And they were even giving me that immediate feedback. So I knew pretty early on that was sort of the direction I was going to go. And because I started so late, I didn't think I'd have a professional career. But I will say, generally, guys have a little bit easier time than our counterparts. So I, even though I was pretty green when I came out, I had enough ability. I was able to get a job professionally and dance professionally for 8 years, mostly for repertory dance theater, which is in Salt Lake City, Utah, and eventually ended up leaving the dancer path because of a back injury, and started to switch more towards choreographing and teaching full time. So
That's yeah, I mean, I've known you guys for a long time, and I've never knew that your parents were playwrights. But when you were talking, I was thinking about first the music teacher aspect of it, because I had some great music teachers growing up, chorus teachers, drama teachers, and my parents were also both in the theater. My mom directed and starred in shows. My dad did more stage management. And I was just wondering, how many of us come from that kind of background, or are really influenced and shaped by those teachers that aren't necessarily dance teachers, but other arts teachers, how important that is. Um, wow. Okay. So you are our first directors of a contemporary modern dance company. And I thought if you would just want to describe your company to people out there, um, in as many words or as few words as you'd like, but just what it is that you all do, and what you get up to. I know firsthand that you have a lot of experience in the tech world. You do some amazing things with AI. So I kind of want you to maybe explain where that drive to push that envelope comes from. But please let us know about NobleMotion Dance.
Yeah, so we're in our 17th season, and we're based in Houston. We were founded in 2009. I think immediately going back to what you were just talking about, where your family came from. I mean, I've got in many ways a theater perspective to the way I think about the craft, and which is total theater production and storytelling, character, narrative, um, but also spectacle, which is a big part of theater as well. And I wanted to just grab the audience and pull them into a place maybe where they were experiencing something new or something different. That's sort of one of the foundational aspects. I think the other part of it that's really paramount is the sense of collaboration. And that starts with there's two of us as directors. And so we're collaborating. I mean, our whole marriage is a collaboration, but so is our job. It's all a collaboration. Parenting's a collaboration. We have two kids,
Yes.
as you well know.
Yes.
And so right there, it started, but when we founded our company, it was the two of us and a lighting designer. And from the very beginning, we were thinking about dance not just from like what can our bodies do, but how does light impact our bodies? How does it alter the way the body is seen? And I think once we started to bring other art forms or other collaborators into the room, we found our worldview was expanded exponentially. We were forced to think in a multi-directional way. So a big focus for us has been on innovation and technology. Right now, we're working a lot with neuroscientists, and we're really excited about this research. We're in the middle of phase 3 of this research with music, dance, and neuroscience. And when we started this collaboration, I don't think we thought, well, this will be interesting. We don't know very much about neuroscience. And what's ended up happening in the last 3 years is we're starting to become what I would call a soft expert in neuroscience. I certainly don't have all the schooling for it, but I'm really starting to understand the way the brain works and be able to talk the language with neuroscientists in the room. I'm starting to give lectures. We're giving lectures and demonstrations. But the unexpected findings so far is that dance is one of the most neurologically complicated things you can do.
Yeah.
The reason we have a brain is because we move. Plants don't need brains because they don't move. And once you start to move through space, you need a cognitive system to help you move through space, and that's why we have a brain. And so it starts to raise all sorts of interesting questions, which is why is dance across all cultures and all regions? What is the benefit of dance? And we're finding that it's really good for brain development and health.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates really important advocacy for the art form at a time when I think it's really needed, and at a time of AI and machine learning where we're kind of starting to move away from the corporal human aspects of who we are in some ways and leaning on the AI and the machine learning aspects. And so that's what's been really fun is we're starting to go, hey, wait a minute. We just went to an AI conference at the United Nations in May in Geneva. And most of the people there presenting were focusing on the technology. What can the AI do? What can the machine learning do? And ours was one of the few that was really focused on humanity and using AI and machine learning to study humanity and to make humanity more vibrant versus the other way around. And I thought that was a really interesting, and I think that's because it was dance centric. I mean, you can't, yeah. I don't know if you want to add.
Well, I was just going to say, and I think that we're kind of part of this team or been brought into this team. I mean, obviously for our choreographic expertise and, and a company known for being very collaborative, but also I think because we have really developed our technological sort of capabilities and understanding of the technology, we've been able to kind of like understand the neuroscience, brain cap, systems as well. So it's very interesting. I don't think it's by accident that our company is involved in this at the level that it's sort of happening. And I think the other thing that's interesting is that even though it sounds like, oh, you're studying the brain now in neuroscience, yeah, but AI is also helping us do that. It's actually really interesting how it's all kind of meshed together. Yeah.
That's fascinating. So I can't wait to see what you all come up with and how this progresses. I want to get into some of our hiring topics and audition topics, and get into some of the questions that we've had from some of our mentees. The first one is, what qualities or attributes do you all look for in dancers for your company? And are these certain things that you found were strengths of yours as dancers, or are they, um, kind of influenced by former directors, former companies you were with? How are they shaped in that way?
I think I like the way you frame that question. I think that yes, our strengths I think that influences some of what we see. Of course, it's our own bias. I would also say that we are the choreographers, teachers that we are today because of many of the amazing dance teachers, educators we've had over the many years, and they influence us. They live through us
Hmm.
in many ways, and they're too many to list. But yeah. I love that you framed it up that way. I would say for me personally, if you go back to, what it is that we're trying to do, what our sort of mission is that we described as our organization, we don't just want dancers, we want collaborators. So we want dancers who can come in and help us problem solve, who can challenge us, um, who put the work before themselves. Dance can be easily very self-focused, like look at what I can do, or and I think we tend to look for a certain level of maturity where the dancers in the room and they understand that it's not really about any of us. It's about what we do together collectively and how we proceed with the artwork. So that brings to the forefront qualities such as I'm looking for some level of individuality. I'm looking for artistic voice. I'm also looking for somebody that can blend a little bit when we put the group together. We are not, I would say by our nature, our work isn't what I would call cookie cutter dancer, where we have everybody in a core looking the same.
Mhm.
That I hope that didn't come off sounding demeaning. That's not the way I meant it. I mean, it's beautiful when you can do it, but that's just not what our work is about. Uh, so I think we want somebody who's very present in the room,
Mhm.
and very engaged and positive. I love doing this. So if a dancer comes into the room, the way I like to kind of frame it to dancers is when you walk into the room, you can add to the room, you can be neutral, or you can take away from the room. And I want people who come in and add. And if there's a dancer that comes in and um, either is too self-focused or brings darkness or
Having a challenging time for something
whatever
they
that may
can't
be.
really
Yeah.
add.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. It needs to be fun. I mean, it's really hard to make artwork and it requires a team effort. And I think if everybody's coming together and adding, then you get that sweet spot where the sum of it is greater than its parts in many
Yeah.
ways.
So, yeah, obviously collaboration, the ability to adapt to the environment that you're in is important. What advice would you give to dancers that are going into a new company or going into a new situation where they're maybe struggling with that, or they're
Mm.
just trying to prepare themselves for that shift?
No. I mean, I think it's a little bit tough because I think that what we are looking for is we work with dancers as students and we're helping them hopefully get to that level of maturity that we're looking for. And I think for our company, we are looking for a level of maturity.
Hmm.
So sometimes you can't rush that process,
Yeah.
but I think that you can try to ask yourself, am I engaged in what's happening in the room? Am I doing my best? Not perfect. I mean, nobody's looking for, we're not looking for perfection, but am I doing my best? Am I trying to be contributing? Also, so, I mean, this is assuming that you are have a strong technical base and that you know, you've excelled in the classroom before moving forward. Again, we're not looking for everybody to be the same. So maybe it's also knowing what your artistic voice is if you're asked to contribute it. That's another part too.
I mean, so I teach a career resources class at SAM, and well, so do you actually. And we talk about this a lot. I think a couple things is that you have access to do a lot of research now. I would encourage any young artist that's interested in a company to do the research on the company and reframe the way they look at it, which is a lot of times we look, I remember this feeling like, am I good enough or do they like me to be in this company? But sometimes you can also flip that and go, is this company the right company for me?
Mm.
Right. And that requires you to zoom outside of yourself and look at what your skill set is and what you have to offer and being sort of pragmatic in that and that. And sometimes that's where a mentor also becomes really important. I remember one of my first ballet teacher who wrote one of the famous ballet books. She told me pretty early on, she's like, you're a great mover. You're never going to be a ballet dancer. And I was like, I remember I was crushed at first. I was like, she's like, that's not going to be a good use of your skill and your time. You're going to do other things. And I remember feeling offended, not for a long time, but maybe for a week. And then I so thankful that she had that really honest moment with me and really kind of helped me see that I really my path lied in a different direction. So it's to kind of look at what you have to offer, do your research, is it a good fit? And then when you get in a company, there's also fitting in with a new culture, getting to know the new dancers. I remember when I got into RDT, I was by far the youngest. I was 24, and most of the other dancers were 30 and above. It was a very mature company, and it was a rep company. So we had different choreographers coming. One week we're doing Martha Graham, the next week we're doing some unusual artist from Europe who's doing very unusual movements. So we had this full range of work we were doing. And one week the choreographer loved me, and the next week I couldn't do anything right, and so you have to figure out, and you were in a ballet company and you have your moments where you shine and your moments where you don't as much. So you're really working to try and be as adaptable and flexible as you can, and to not beat yourself up in an unhealthy way in that process, and be grateful for the gifts you have, and look at the people around you and see what they have to offer, that maybe they have different strengths than you and where you can learn from them. I think
That's a big one.
that's a big part of it as well. And if you have that right mindset going, and I think you're going to find a lot more success. Whereas if you go the other direction, which is, starts to kind of self-loathing and I'm never good enough and all of that, then you're probably not going to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah, I no, I agree. I heard something at some point, and then this is not the right wording, but it was like basically to look around and to see everyone, not to compare. Like you want to be observant, you want to see what they have to offer,
Yeah.
you see what's out there, but you don't want to compare. And I think that's important and something that I certainly wish I could have thought of more when I was dancing. I have a question about, and maybe this is more for you, Dion, for a dancer that is very classically trained all
Mhm.
through their schooling, and then they want to go the more modern dance, contemporary route. What advice do you have for that dancer out there? What
Yeah.
steps do you take? I mean, I know there's research involved and all that, but any insights into that shift?
Well, I think it kind of maybe takes two, because I did think of myself as one kind of dancer, and then slowly over time I switched to, a different kind of mentality of what I wanted to pursue. And I think that the reason that I felt like I switched over was through having the opportunity to study with different kinds of people and so it's having experiences that start to change you from
Yeah.
the inside out. Um, and then, just being inspired by works that I was seeing that maybe were more in one landscape versus the other. So I think that was what led me into that. So, I think every once in a while I will see a dancer that will pigeonhole themselves and saying, I can only do this, or this is what I'm good at, and that's all I'm gonna stay inside that. And whether that's like sort of from the drill team world.
We have a lot of that in
We
Texas.
have a lot of that in Texas, right? Versus, a contemporary dancer, or obviously, sort of like a ballet, but I actually think that most companies are now looking for people to be much more well-rounded in general, even in the ballet world, right?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of contemporary choreographers working with ballet companies now. And so if you're the student who has expanded their experiences and can bring those colors and those kinds of skill sets to the forefront when you're in the room with those choreographers, even maybe in a more classical setting, you're going to probably fare better than those who didn't expand or have decided I'm only this, because I see it the other way too. I'll see people say, I don't do classical ballet. I don't take ballet classes. I am only this. And I just think that anytime you have that mentality, you are definitely limiting yourself. Um, for better or for worse or whatever. So I think it's just getting out there and having experiences, taking the risk, going to classes that maybe you don't feel as comfortable in. But as we all know, over time, with new things, you become more comfortable. And you'll change. You'll change just by the very nature of exposing yourself to it. That's what I think.
And I'll say that that's good for brain health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, when you get outside of your comfort zone, you're pressing your brain to do things.
Yeah.
Challenging in a really good way. So you can look at it that way
I
too.
mean, take a tap class, even if you're like, I'm never going to do tap, but hey, that's really working your brain for sure.
Um, so a different pathway question. What advice do you have for dancers that want to take the university route, the more collegiate route? How do they get the most out of their degree? How can they possibly gain a little professional experience while still in school? Because,
Yeah.
it's that catch 22. If you get out of school and people are asking, what's your experience? You're like, well, I don't have any experience, but you have to have experience.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So the university route is really great. I mean, here's what I love about a liberal arts education, and a lot of in this moment, there's a lot of focus on getting a skill and graduating and getting a job where that skill applies, and that's what we do. That's what we should do. I don't know that that's actually. I have some issues with that on some levels. I think what I love about a liberal arts education is about educating the whole person.
Mm.
Now there are, some places where there's more conservatory where you're not being asked to take English, math, and be exposed to a lot of different kinds of things, but you're still being exposed to a lot of different styles, a lot of different teachers. And when you walk into a university, I see people transform in 4 years.
Every time.
Their whole being, just their world outlook, the way they problem solve, how they've been exposed to different kinds of people and different kinds of ideas. They've had their ideas challenged, and it really, I think, prepares them to be a better citizen of this country. But when you do something like that, right? Because you can look at things from many perspectives. You can, right? So just on that level, artistically, you want to get in and you want to, it's the same thing as you want to get in and you want to take as much dance class as you are. You want to start to see what is your voice? What do you have to say? Where are your strengths? And, for me, it was choreography. And I found that. And I was like, okay, I was able to find that where I had never even considered that prior to my university education. But folks find all different pathways. Sometimes it's more in the sciences, where they want to go on and get into physical therapy and use their love of dance and work with dancers in that way. So it can go in so many different directions. Dance doesn't have to be this idea, this small idea where it's you go on stage and you do this. We have many artists who are now on the production side of it,
Mm.
and doing great jobs they love, and they're helping other artists realize their dance vision on stage because they're bringing them to life. So,
I mean, we have a student who graduated not too long ago who now works for Performing Arts Houston. And
Mm.
so she helps them with their programming and, year to year, what artists are they bringing into to Houston that's going to impact, the whole community. So, I mean, she's a traditional you know, dance major.
yeah.
And she's got a pretty big voice on what PAH brings into Houston. That's huge.
And so I think there's so many ways you could go inside of this. I would say again, it kind of goes back to this idea of not pigeonholing who you are, what you are. I think a lot of times we like to use what we do as our identity. And I know that I'm sometimes guilty of that as well. I'll say, oh, I'm a choreographer. Well, I'm a person who likes to choreograph. I also like to do all of these other things as well, right?
Mhm.
That doesn't have to mean I only do one thing. And so I would encourage young people if they're looking at coming in, um, to expand and explore and be curious. And if
Mm.
they do that, I think that curiosity, I think that the skills that they're going to learn, the problem solving, the ideas that they're going to bump up again is going to give them a much richer life.
Mhm.
I don't know if I answered your question in necessarily the way that
I think that was great.
yeah, okay, great.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, it's awesome to get that insight on the collegiate world and the university route. I want to talk a little bit about auditions now. I think we kind of touched on audition prep for dancers and, going in and looking outward, not looking inward, and kind of owning your skills and, showing up as whatever dancer you are. Do you all have any audition do's and don'ts? And it could be anything like don't wear a white leotard or don't bring all your earthly possessions into the studio, or it could be body language things and just ways that you present yourself. Don't ask too many questions. Anything.
I've got one, I think. And just because, we hold auditions at the beginning of each of our semesters. And this is interesting because, we'll watch the freshmen audition versus the seniors. And, and you just see different patterns develop over time and those kinds of things. But anyways, that's just, yeah. But I, I actually am sad for a dancer when I see them give up inside of the audition while they're performing the thing. It's like you messed up, you feel like you can't recover, you're now frustrated, and you now like really like it demonstrates, it's become very clear that it's all over and you've walked away and whatever, it's like that is not gonna help. So trying to learn how whenever you feel like, oh, wait, I did mess up or I'm not doing this perfectly or whatever, it's like, well, what can you make out of that moment? And I am way more apt to want to cast somebody that I see have a moment where they have to make a choice, and the choice that they make is to stay in it and figure it out. And that is a very important, skill to kind of try to develop, for yourself if you're going to be doing a lot of auditions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's how you recover. I'm sure
Yeah.
it would go the same for your company as well. If you were, looking at some dancer coming in and you were having them do some rep and they were having a hard time, if they just sat in the corner, probably wouldn't get the job. Yeah.
No, no, you won't.
Right.
You won't get the job.
No.
Yeah. I will add to that just the energy that you bring into the room. You know,
Mhm.
and it doesn't. You don't have to be a major extrovert necessarily to bring a lot of positive or contributing energy. People who are introverts who can do that. There's not one way to do that. You can just feel it. You can feel when somebody's engaged. So for me, it's like this intuitive level of feeling what the dancers that all the parts coming together. Can they meet most of the technical demands of what we're looking for? Um, can they make the dancers around them better? Can they create community in that moment? Do they use their eyes to see the people in the room?
Mhm.
Their focus. Do they look at me
Yeah.
in a way that's like active and engaged and positive? Those are.
If you can't tell, we really do not like to work with negative dancers.
I don't know many people who do actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
would agree with that.
it's that's a yeah. And I think here's another like, okay, so then for the company, if you think about the company auditions, I will say that mostly we hire dancers that we know through
Mm.
working with them in different ways. Maybe they've come to multiple summer dance intensives. They've showed a true interest in what we are doing. And maybe we'll call them up and give them an opportunity. Or, we do work at a university and we have trained dancers to dance the way we want them to dance for multiple years in a row. So maybe we're looking for talented students who may be looking to stay in the area and, we'll work with them that way. But we do hold cold auditions sometimes.
Mhm.
And we only hold auditions when we're truly looking for somebody. So if we're holding auditions because we need some actual dancers for whatever reason. So another thing that we will do in our company auditions that I don't know if I would see in a different kind of audition setting as often, but we'll usually give them phrases and they'll do phrases back and do that traditional thing for about an hour. But usually the second hour or the second half of an audition, we're asking the dancers to creatively, the auditionees, we'll usually make a cut and then we'll have a smaller group and we'll take the auditionees and ask them to work with one of our dancers creatively. And they
Mm,
have to come up with something together.
that's cool.
We want to see how they work together and
Yeah.
we want to see how creative they can be. And
I,
that tells us a lot.
And within our dancers are usually at the audition and they're giving us they're
They're
part of
giving us feedback as well.
like did you like working with that person? Do you feel like that person, what you could create with them, you could problem solve with them, and their input is really important. Just that's an unusual. I'm not saying we're the only company that does that. I'm sure there's many
I'm
others,
sure there
but
are, but
it's probably less common. And I find it's really valuable for us. But I would say also, don't be afraid to, you might be asked to improvise. If
yeah.
you're a younger dancer, be prepared to improvise and show us who you are a little bit through that. Don't be, you might be asked to give a creative prompt and to come up with some sort of choreographic uh, movement signature. Be ready for that. And this is again where the research, if you do your research, you go online before you go into an audition. This is probably the simplest but most effective advice. Go to the website where you're auditioning, look at how they present the dancers, look at how they talk about their work, and like you can even make a spreadsheet and be like, okay, I'm looking at Taylor. Like you can look at Taylor, you can look at how they're all presented. I know, having talked to Taylor folks, they don't like tattoos, or they didn't when he was alive. I don't know if that's still the case, but you can kind of look at how they present themselves. What are they wearing in the photos? Are they well put together? Others may be, like much more relaxed, and you can kind of pick up on that. Clearly, if you're going for more of a classical ballet company, you should know what the expectations, if you've been taking ballet regularly, of what they're going to be looking for in terms of, yeah, you should come probably with a bun or with your hair back and no jewelry or anything, and
Yeah.
lights and leotard and the correct shoes and all of that. So research.
Yeah, no, I like that. Elise and I have done that with students before. We've sat down, we've put out lists of companies and we've put out, what their rep is. And if we happen to know somebody there, like just having an idea
Who
of
do you know?
and yeah, doing the research, I think is important. So 17 years in NobleMotion Dance, teaching at Sam Houston State. How have your expectations of dancers changed over time? And what do you think would be good advice for the next generation coming up now, and where
Hmm.
things are going, possibly?
A lot has changed. It feels like in the last 17 years. COVID has played a role in that.
Hmm.
AI, machine learning, these technologies, the polarization of this country. I see all of those things seeping into different aspects. It um, there's something that's been gained, and I also feel like there's things that have been lost. And since we started this, it feels very different. It feels more difficult in some ways. It was always difficult to run a dance company because it's a nonprofit,
Yeah.
and particularly when you're starting from the ground, there's a lot that goes into it. But it does feel, it feels like there's more traps. And that's not directed at any one person. It's just like, be careful of this, be careful of that. I feel that all over the place. There were always some, but I feel like they've gotten more substantial. Um, I would say the challenges in the dance world is I feel like there's for organizations of a certain size, there's a bit of a glass ceiling that's hard to break through to get your organization financially growing.
Hmm.
I I always encourage our dancers, again, this comes back to research, to look at what the size of the organization and what your expectations are. So we might have an ideal of what you want as a dancer, but unfortunately, there's not a lot of jobs out there as a dancer that give you everything you need, which might include health insurance and a retirement and all of those things. There's just not that many of them out there. And so you need to see what the organization is capable of providing you and be realistic when you go into it. And there is, I forgot who said this. I've heard this at some point. There's three things to look at when you are trying to get a dance job. There's three things to consider. I haven't thought if there might be a fourth, but I still think this works. Good pay, good people, good work. And if you break it down into that, I think when you're first starting, you take one of them. Like, hey, this is really good work. I don't necessarily connect with the people, but and it's not paying, but I know that I'm in good work and I'm getting on stage right now and have the opportunity to get seen, or good money, but the work isn't great, but at least I'm paying my bills. You can do one. The dream is, I think, to get two or three.
Yeah.
Uh, and if you can start to move towards that, I think you'll have a very fulfilling career as a dancer. Um, so you can kind of think about that, like, hey, I may not be getting paid a lot, but I really love the work and the people are great. And I have another job on the outside so I can get the health insurance, and they work with me on that. That can be very fulfilling. Um, so to kind of frame those things up, give you a lens of which to kind of look at how, are you happy? Are you pleased with what you're doing? I think a lot of young folks have an idea of the way things should be, and when those things aren't met, it can be challenging for them.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that that's intensified
yeah,
in the time that we've been doing this at this level. Just the expectations are greater,
Hmm.
um,
in all directions, I would
but
say.
they're not necessarily realistic. Perhaps. I don't know. I mean, I do think that it's the job of the younger generations to push the older generations in all things, you know. Um, and we were younger dancers, right? We were all, and now we're at this stage, and we'll be whatever, So I do think that those things are important, and I do think that exercising your voice is very important. But sometimes you can become disillusioned. I feel like the sometimes dancers become disillusioned more quickly than they used to, and then I'm not sure what that means for the art form, you know, moving forward. So it's kind of an interesting place to be in. That's just being super honest.
No, yeah, I totally agree. I feel like there's an expectation from a lot of dancers, and there's an entitlement to having a career and having a quote unquote successful career, because they've done X, Y, and Z. And the fact of the matter is sometimes it just doesn't work out, and that's really unfortunate. But yeah, I think it is something that um, we're dealing with and we're seeing a lot. But um, I think having talks like this is good because you get an insight onto how to make it, and how the decisions about who gets a job, and how companies are made and built, how that goes into everything. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about um, correspondence, as far as email correspondence with dancers. And maybe this is more with the university side of things, because I'm sure you get a lot of back and forth with students and administrators. But how important is it to you, um, email etiquette from a dancer? As far as like no text lingo. How important are cover letters and letters of recommendation and how they're written, and CVs and all that. And then on the back of that, any video submissions you get from dancers, whether it be a prepared video or something you see on like social media, how important are those to you as far as hiring a dancer or reaching out to a dancer? I know that
Mm.
was a very long question, but
Yeah, so I'll frame this up in two ways. So at Sam Houston, we're looking for ability and potential, and hunger, right? Um, we are very open. We want all kinds of dancers to come in to the door, and we want to add to they are, but also keep them who they are. So I think for those sort of auditions, whenever you're writing I would say anybody in general, avoid text. Always say dear so and so, or hey so and so, or dear professor. You can depend on, and always sincerely, and contact information on the bottom. But I would there's a formality to it that I think, remember what you say or how you say it is how we're going to view you if we don't know you. And that's in many cases, your first opportunity to be taken seriously as a person. And so if you present yourself, as a 17-year-old high school kid who's, meeting up with some friends after school, we're going to not take you as seriously as if you present yourself in a professional way right out the bat, right? So I would say, yes, all of those things are really important. Now, what's inside the CV or what's inside the video that you show, you have to be who you are, and you shouldn't apologize for that. Now, that means some doors may be closed to you and some may be more open, right? Um, Inside of a professional setting, when I get a letter from a student and they send me a video and all of that and they present them, I always take the time to look at their material.
Yeah.
I'm not always looking for somebody in that moment. Usually I try and respond as well and say, hey, we're not looking for somebody right now, or we might be doing an audition at this point, and I'll look at the video reel. And for me, it doesn't matter if it's super snazzy, the video or anything like that. I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at how they move, how they dance, how they express themselves, how they present themselves as a mover. Those are the things that are catching my eye, and I can usually tell very quickly if somebody's kind of ready for somebody I would want to look at a little bit longer, or somebody's just not ready yet. Maybe they're fresh out of undergrad and they're sending me videos and they're one of 20 people on stage and I can barely see them, and I'm looking at them like, okay, they're nice dancers, but they're not quite convinced they're ready to get on stage with our dancers. So I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, and something that we always, because in this career resources class, where I teach a professional issues and dance class for the graduate level, and one of the things that we talk about are it is always better to have a nice, clean, beautiful, like a simply framed video of somebody dancing by themselves in a studio, maybe something that they've choreographed or they're improvising for you or something like that, than it is to have a really badly, videoed, again, one of many, you can hardly see them, dark lighting, I don't know who this is, on stage, you know what I mean? So it's like I know that sometimes it could be difficult to get a hold of like really good footage of you dancing, but you have some control over that. You can always say, hey, let me rent out this studio and go in here and, have a friend video me and, whatever, and at least do something clean and simple. So since we all do have these amazing cameras in our pockets all the time, there's really not too much of an excuse not to at least try it, so sometimes that's better than, well, I danced for this person and I have to show them an example of that, but I don't have any footage of it because I wasn't allowed. It's like, well, that's okay. You can put that on your resume and still do this other thing, that you do have control over. So trying to figure out how you can take control over those situations as well, I think it takes a little effort, but those efforts, I think, are, pay off.
And I'll add, and I know this is probably going to lead into another question you have in a minute, but you were constantly, as a dancer, you are marketing yourself. You are selling, you're advertising what it is that you have to offer. So if you think about that, that'll like, okay, I want to make a solid impression with these people. I want to market myself in a smart way. If you think about that with all of your interactions and you start to approach it that way, it will guide you quite a bit with your decision-making process.
Yeah, I think that kind of leads into I wanted to talk about your advice for longevity in this career, which I think we touched on a little bit earlier, but there's the after the performance career aspect of it. And I think what you were just talking about could kind of tie into that. Do you have any advice for people that are thinking about, building that part of their lives while they're still dancing? Is it a networking thing? Is it kind of looking into different aspects of an organization, of an arts team, or even for someone that has ideas outside of the performing arts world?
It's interesting how every experience I've had to do not when I'm not directly in a studio dancing, all of those experiences have helped us do what we do in some way. So some of I know Dionne for a long time, while she was in grad school, was doing tickets, box office for.
So I worked for the Salt Lake Acting Company for many years and did front of house stuff. So that was everything from working with season ticket holders to learning how to work with patrons, coming in and out of the theater, to running the front of the house at times. And now I do all of those things as in my company position. I have to work with patrons. I want them to have a great experience. I want them to come back to our shows the next time. I know how to talk with the box office about working on ticket prices and how that whole thing should go. I mean, I use that skill. I didn't know I was going to use that skill to the extent I do, but I use it every single year. So yeah, that's really interesting.
And then early on, we realized that we needed to have quality video for our work if we were going to get grants and donors. And so we bought a decent camera. These things didn't exist back then. We're going back in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we invested in a good camera and started teaching ourselves how to do video editing, which of course now most people can do pretty quickly. But those skills then translated into us working for other arts organizations and doing their documentation of their work, archival and promotional videos, which then led to us starting to incorporate it into our work, which then led to me studying it in grad school, to now it's a big part of our work, the technology that I started doing so I could.
But this was all because we're like, we need good footage of our dances,
yeah,
you know?
Yeah. And now we teach dance technology classes at SAM as well. So it's just interesting how you add up skills and they don't go away. And sometimes there's not a 1-to-1 ratio where I do this skill and I'm going to use it this exact same way, but those skills inform you as an artist in many ways. So I would say, if you can find jobs that outside jobs, if you need to have outside more practical jobs, find jobs that are still tethered to the arts or things you love in some way, that you can leverage at some point later on in your career. That can be very helpful. I mean, even waiting tables or bartending, which I know a lot of artists do, is there's so much to be learned there. You're dealing with people. You can look at it as practice for being on stage and how you interact with people. But those skills then translate to if you're going to be a teacher one day, or if you're going to be administrator or run an arts organization, you're still going to have to talk to people. And that practice gets put into use. And I think sometimes, again, that goes back to that earlier conversation where we often think that we have to learn a skill and then we have to use that skill in this specific way. But I think actually we're always collecting skills and we try and leverage them in a lot of different directions at the same time. That's what makes us rich, interesting people. And
Yeah, I think, there have been a few themes in this conversation, and collaboration, openness, and positivity are the three that come to mind, which is really beautiful.
We sound like hippies over here a little bit.
Hey, man, I'm in California now, so,
There you go.
My last question, and I know we've already touched on this, and you've both given such great advice and insight on all these questions, but for any young dancers out there that are looking to get hired in a professional setting, what advice would you give to them? Could be anything, could be overarching, could be very specific, but if there was one thing you could tell a young dancer out there, what would it be?
Really simple. And this is super simple advice. If you find an organization that has a mission you believe in or is doing things that you're excited about, don't ask the question or don't frame things up as, what can that organization do for me? Flip it. What can you do for that organization? Because that means you're working for an organization you believe in, you're working in a mission you believe in, and you are now talking about the organization as a way of you're going to come in and contribute. And a lot of people, observing this kind of goes back to this earlier discussion we were having about the change that's happened over the last few years. I see a lot of people, young people, come in and talk about what they're going to get out of what I have to offer them.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you shouldn't consider that, but if you find an organization or dance company, anything that you believe in, reframe it. You will find yourself much more successful. And I think you'll find that you have a much more fulfilling career because it's more than just about you. It's about something larger than yourself. And I think that's true, the way I've tried to live my career.
I'm trying to think of things that we haven't already somewhat touched on, I think, and I am teaching the career resources seniors right now, and they're all super nervous, and they have different kinds of goals, not just performing goals, but there are several of them that want to do company work. I think to stay focused on what it is that you want to do. I think that the students who are still taking dance classes a year from when they graduate regularly. Like they have made the choices in their life that, yes, I have to do these other jobs or I have these other responsibilities that, but I am still making sure that taking daily class or taking class X amount of times a week or whatever, keeping up my craft is still important to me a year later. They're probably the ones that are going to continue to succeed. It's interesting. I see in dance, right?
Dance.
So I see a lot of folks who sometimes, well, he asked about companies.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I'm just clarifying.
So I see some folks who end up making sacrifices, and what gets cut out is that daily practice or that focus of whatever it is that they want to do. So say they want to choreograph a lot and they send out their choreography to 2 or 3 places and it doesn't happen. Then they just stop doing it. You know what I mean? It's like, so what are you going to continuously find a focus and stay with that focus for a long term? I think that the people who do that, I work with a lot of people who are looking for teaching jobs. They've gotten their graduate degrees and now they want to go teach. And a year later, they've already changed their mind because they didn't, stick with that for a long term to find that right position and that right, and I think that the people who stay in it and stay focused are the ones who are eventually going to find their right place. Is like, do you have the patience to do that for a long enough time, yeah. And then I'm also a big proponent of, you can also just start your own company.
Yeah.
With all of your talented best friends.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can make your own dreams come true, and maybe you don't have to have somebody else, there to do it for you. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Andy and Dionne, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Rhodes.
That was really awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited for people to hear everything you had to say. And yeah, y'all are the best. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Rhodes.
Thanks. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to Creative Generations podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow us on Instagram and our YouTube channel. Also, please visit us at creativegenerations-dance.com. And for more information on Noble Motion Dance, visit NoblemotionDance.com.